close friend, Slash, who's my boyfriend's son, who's really, really cute.
At 79 years old, after more than 5 decades of fame, heartbreak, reinvention, and legendary artistry, Cher has finally done something no one ever believed she would dare to do. For the first time in her entire career, she is naming the 7 men, 7 world-famous artists who shaped her passion, her music, her identity, and her soul. For decades, fans only on the dazzling gowns, the iconic wigs, the Grammy speeches, and the unstoppable superstar presence that made Cher one of the most electrifying entertainers alive. But behind that fierce confidence was a woman who lived, loved, suffered, and rose again through relationships so powerful that they silently shaped every version of Cher the world has known. These weren't just lovers, these were the men who changed her, men whose intensity filled her lyrics, men whose heartbreak became her strength, men whose brilliance pushed her to evolve into the artist she is today. Some gave her fire, some gave her stability, some shattered her, and some healed her in ways no audience ever saw. For decades, Cher refused to name them. She kept those memories locked away from tabloids, from interviewers, even from her closest fans. But today, she's finally opening the door. And when you hear who these men are, when you discover the secret emotional history behind her most iconic songs, you will never listen to Cher the same way again. Every chorus, every note, every performance suddenly takes on new meaning. This is not gossip. This is the truth behind a legend. And everything starts with the rock god who transformed her life in just 9 unforgettable days. Greg Allman. Greg Allman entered Cher's life like a wild southern wind, untamed, soulful, and impossible to ignore. When Cher met Greg, she was standing at the peak of her power, already a superstar whose name echoed across music, television, and Hollywood. But Greg was something entirely different. He wasn't polished. He wasn't packaged. He wasn't the kind of rock star built for magazine covers. He was raw, real, and profoundly gifted. The kind of artist who bleeds emotion into every note. His voice carried the weight of storms and heartbreak, and his presence radiated a truth that was rare in an industry full of glitter and illusion. And that truth pulled Cher in instantly. With Greg, Cher felt something she almost never felt in the entertainment world, a scene. Not as an icon, not as a brand, but as a woman, vulnerable, talented, searching for something real beneath all the expectations that had defined her life. They married in 1975, shocking the world. Fans doubted them. The media mocked them. The industry whispered that it was doomed from the start. And in a way, they were right. The marriage lasted only 9 days, a piece of Hollywood trivia repeated endlessly as a punchline. But what the world never understood was this. Those 9 days contained more honesty, more tenderness, and more genuine connection than many marriages that last decades. Greg was fighting his inner demons, addiction, chaos, and the heavy shadows of fame. Cher was fighting her own, the never-ending comparisons to Sunny, the pressure of reinvention, the weight of being endlessly watched and judged. Their lives were on 2 different tracks, moving too fast and too far apart. But the love was real, undeniably, fiercely real. Even after the marriage unraveled, there was no bitterness, no angry interviews, no public jabs, just a quiet, enduring affection between 2 people who had understood each other at a depth outsiders couldn't imagine. Friends later recalled that whenever Cher spoke about Greg, her eyes softened, as if she were looking back at a memory that was both sweet and aching. Greg taught her that vulnerability wasn't a weakness, but a rare form of strength, that real artists don't hide from their pain, they transform it. And although their marriage lasted 9 days, the mark he left on her lasted a lifetime. When Greg passed away in 2017, Cher was visibly shaken, her grief raw and unmistakable. She mourned not just the man, but the chapter of her life that only he had shared with her, a chapter built on honesty, chaos, tenderness, and truth. Greg Allman was in her life for only a moment, but his impact lived inside her forever. If Greg Allman was the wild, soulful storm of Cher's life, then Val Kilmer was the spark that lit an entirely different kind of flame. Their worlds collided during a vulnerable chapter for Cher, a time when she was stepping away from the comfort of music and daring to prove herself as a serious actress. Hollywood wasn't ready to see her that way. Critics doubted her, producers underestimated her, and Cher, for the first time in years, felt exposed. Then came Val. Val Kilmer possessed a magnetism that was almost dangerous, a quiet, brooding intensity that drew people toward him without a single word spoken. He wasn't just handsome, he was ambitious, deeply committed to his craft, and unafraid to take on roles that pushed emotional boundaries. Cher found that irresistible. Their chemistry was immediate and electric. People noticed it across sets, across rooms, even across crowded industry events. It wasn't the loud kind of passion, it simmered, it tightened the air between them, it made every glance feel like a silent conversation. Unlike Greg, Val wasn't part of the music world. He belonged to Hollywood, the world Cher was fighting to break into with legitimacy. And Val saw her not as a gimmick or a singer dabbling in acting, but as an artist capable of depth, emotion, and serious dramatic work. He believed in her, and that belief mattered more than Cher ever admitted publicly. Crew members later recalled how the two would orbit one another during downtime on sets, sharing private conversations about scripts, techniques, character psychology, the intimate language of actors. Cher was absorbing everything, growing, evolving, and Val was right there encouraging her every step of the way. Their relationship burned hot and fast, intense, passionate, but ultimately brief. They weren't meant for forever, they were meant for transformation. Cher learned from Val what it meant to be fearless as an actress, to leap into roles without apology, without fear of judgment, without holding back parts of herself to fit an image the industry tried to impose on her. Val, for his part, never spoke ill of her, not once. Whenever her name came up in interviews years later, he talked about her with a softness that betrayed how deeply he respected her. He called her fearless, a word that embedded itself into Cher's heart. Their romance didn't end in heartbreak or scandal. It simply completed its purpose. Val moved on to new films, new women, new adventures across the world. Cher continued shaping her acting career with a newfound determination. But the imprint remained. It was one of those rare connections that arrives precisely when you need it, not to heal you, not to rescue you, but to remind you of who you can become. And for Cher, Val Kilmer was a turning point, a fire she didn't expect, a lesson she never forgot. If Val Kilmer was the artistic spark Cher needed, then Tom Cruise was the undeniable force of a star power she couldn't ignore. Their connection wasn't born from vulnerability or artistic searching. It came from something far more primal, far more electric, the rare gravity that occurs when two global icons find themselves drawn into each other's orbit. Tom Cruise at that time was quickly becoming the golden boy of Hollywood, a phenomenon, a symbol of mainstream success, a man whose very presence could shift the energy of an entire room. And Cher, already a legend in her own right, felt a magnetic pull. Their worlds overlapped naturally, the same elite events, the same private gatherings, the same rarefied air that only a handful of people in the world ever breathe. People noticed immediately the glances, the quiet smiles, the unspoken language that crackled between them whenever they locked eyes. Tabloids speculated for weeks, but what they never understood was that Cher and Tom connected in a way outsiders rarely see, as equals. Two people who understood the pressure of fame, the demand for perfection, the expectations that suffocate even the strongest spirits. With Tom, Cher didn't need to explain the weight on her shoulders. He lived under the same spotlight. Their attraction was intense but uncomplicated, a moment of pure chemistry without the tangled emotional threads that had defined some of her other relationships. There were no deep wounds they were trying to heal in each other, no hidden agendas, no power games, just two megastars, both at the height of their fame, sharing a brief and thrilling collision. Cher later hinted in interviews, without naming him, that some relationships exist simply to shine brightly for a moment and then fade with elegance. Tom was exactly that. Their time together lasted only a few weeks, but it mattered for reasons most people would never understand. It wasn't about heartbreak or drama, it was about freedom. For once, Cher made a choice not based on expectations, not based on image, not based on fear or emotional need, but based solely on desire. Tom saw her, respected her, wanted her, and treated her as someone who belonged on his level, and she appreciated that more than she ever said publicly. Tom Cruise would go on to become one of the biggest movie stars of all time. Cher celebrated him from afar, without jealousy, without regret, and with genuine admiration. Their connection burned quickly, brightly, beautifully, a short chapter, but an important one, because it reminded Cher that she was allowed to choose joy, intensity, and desire simply for herself. If Tom Cruise represented pure attraction, David Geffen represented something far more rare, a man who understood Cher's intellect, not just her beauty, her voice, or her celebrity image. At the time their paths crossed, Cher was navigating one of the most complicated phases of her career. She was fighting for control over her art, her identity, and her place in an industry that constantly tried to mold her into something she wasn't. Enter David Geffen. He wasn't a musician, but he was an artist in a different sense. Someone who could see the architecture of the music business with astonishing clarity. A visionary who understood trends before they happened. A strategist who could sense opportunities long before others even realized they existed. David recognized something in Cher that the industry often overlooked: her intelligence, her business instincts, her ability to understand the emotional and commercial sides of music simultaneously. Where others saw Cher as an image, David saw her as a thinker. Their connection was instant but layered, part intellectual, part emotional, and yes, part romantic. They spent long nights discussing music, creativity, and the changing landscape of entertainment. And unlike many powerful men in her past, David never talked at Cher. He talked with her. He listened to her ideas. He respected her fears. He encouraged her ambition. It was a relationship filled with sophistication and complexity. David wasn't trying to rescue her, nor was he trying to control her. He championed her fiercely. Colleagues later admitted that David defended Cher in meetings when others questioned her artistic decisions. He insisted on giving her space to grow, to experiment, to evolve, and that kind of support was revolutionary. Their romance didn't last forever, but the respect they built did. Years later, David spoke about Cher with unmistakable warmth, acknowledging how she taught him to understand the emotional weight of music, that it wasn't just about profits or charts, but about connection and human truth. Cher, in turn, learned how to navigate the world behind the curtain, the boardrooms, the politics, the deals, without losing her soul. David helped her understand that being a businesswoman didn't mean abandoning her artistry, it meant protecting it. Their relationship evolved from lovers into something perhaps even more valuable, a mutual admiration that stood the test of time. David Geffen wasn't the passion that burned wildly. He wasn't the whirlwind romance. He was the man who sharpened her mind, strengthened her resolve, and reminded her that her talent wasn't just emotional, it was strategic. He left her not with heartbreak, but with empowerment. If David Geffen spoke to Cher's mind, Richie Sambora spoke directly to the fire in her soul. By the time Richie entered her life, he was already a rising force, the guitar hero of Bon Jovi, a band exploding across stadiums and defining the sound of an entire generation. Richie didn't arrive with Hollywood polish or industry politics. He arrived with raw energy, blazing talent, and the rebellious spirit of a true rock musician, and Cher felt that energy immediately. Richie embodied everything she had always admired in pure artists. He didn't care about image. He didn't care about the corporate machine pushing him. He cared about music, real music, the kind that comes from the gut. With him, Cher wasn't the superstar in sequence, carrying the expectations of millions. She was simply a woman who loved rhythm, who understood the loneliness of backstage hallways, who knew the burn of spotlights and the toll of living on the road. They didn't need to explain their lives to each other. They shared the same scars. Their connection was electric. Two artists who lived and breathed passion, two souls wired for intensity. They spent nights talking about guitar riffs, songwriting, philosophy, the madness of touring, and the strange, beautiful pain of devoting your life to the stage. Richie saw past the persona that the world adored. He saw the woman beneath, the vulnerable, complicated, deeply emotional human being who rarely let her guard down, and she trusted him enough to lower that guard. Their romance didn't last long in terms of time, but emotionally it was explosive, a short, bright burn that left a permanent imprint. Richie wasn't intimidated by Cher's history, her fame, or her power. He respected her craft and admired her strength. In return, she admired his authenticity, his refusal to conform, his relentless love for music. People close to them later said that Cher seemed more open, more unfiltered, more herself during her time with Richie than she had in years. He reignited something inside her, a reminder that passion wasn't only for youth, and that intensity didn't need permission to exist. Their relationship didn't evolve into something long-term, but it never dissolved into bitterness. They carried a silent respect for each other that lasted well beyond their romance. Cher would reference their time together in interviews later on, subtly without naming him, in ways that revealed how deeply their connection had mattered. Richie Sambora wasn't a chapter of stability or structure, he was the chapter of fire, a reminder that love can be chaotic, wild, and breathtaking, and still be beautiful. He didn't stay, but the spark he lit inside her never fully went out. If Richie Sambora awakened Cher's fire, Russell Crowe awakened her strength. He entered her life during a period when she was still confidently balancing both acting and performing, a time when she was proving yet again that she could dominate any artistic medium she touched. And Russell saw that power in her instantly. He was intense, not in a reckless way, but in a grounded, deliberate, almost dangerous way. Every role he played carried raw emotion, discipline, and a fearlessness that made Hollywood pay attention. And off a screen, he was exactly the same. Cher recognized a familiar energy in him, the energy of someone who refused to settle for mediocrity, someone who didn't care about fitting into Hollywood's rules, someone who demanded authenticity. And Russell recognized the same in her. Their relationship unfolded quietly, away from paparazzi and tabloid noise, a rare gift for two high-profile stars. They spent time together in private spaces, sharing conversations that weren't shaped by fame, but by truth. Those who knew them said their connection was rooted in deep respect and genuine attraction. Russell admired Cher not just as a performer, but as a warrior, a woman who fought every expectation placed on her, a woman who reinvented herself again and again, a woman who survived the harshest parts of fame and still came back stronger. And Cher admired his artistic ferocity, his refusal to dilute himself for Hollywood, his commitment to craft, his honesty even when it wasn't convenient or charming. What made Russell different from the others was his protectiveness. Not possessive, not controlling, protective. He wanted Cher to feel safe, appreciated, and respected. And she did. Their romance lasted several months, not long enough to reshape their lives, but long enough to leave a powerful memory. It wasn't a relationship of dramatic conflict or emotional chaos. It was steady, grounded, real, and perhaps most importantly, Russell carried their story with dignity. He never sold it, he never leaked it, he never even hinted at details in interviews. In a world where secrets are treated like currency, he guarded theirs like something sacred. Years later, whenever asked about Cher, Russell spoke with warmth and honest admiration, never exploiting their past for attention. Cher valued that deeply. Respect, to her, was everything. Russell Crowe wasn't the whirlwind or the fairy tale. He was the man whose integrity matched her intensity. A reminder that not all meaningful romances are loud. Some are formed in the quiet moments where two strong souls finally relax. If Russell Crowe brought Cher a steadiness, then Josh Lucas brought something even more unexpected: peace. By the time Josh entered her life, Cher had lived through nearly 8 decades of triumphs, heartbreaks, reinventions, and unforgettable romances. She had loved wildly. She had survived our loss. She had grown beyond every limit ever placed on her. And then came Josh, a man who didn't arrive like a storm, a fire, or a whirlwind. He arrived like a breath, quiet, calm, grounded. Josh Lucas was talented, intelligent, and refreshingly down to earth. He didn't chase fame or chaos. He carried a gentleness, a stability, and a mature emotional presence that felt profoundly different from the passionate, tumultuous love stories that had colored Cher's younger years. And this time, Cher was ready for something different. Their connection unfolded slowly, gracefully. There was no rushing, no pressure, no emotional games. Josh didn't see Cher as an icon to be impressed or conquered. He saw her as a woman with a lifetime of stories. Stories filled with pain, wisdom, humor, and resilience. And he respected every layer of her journey. Most importantly, he saw her age not as a limitation, but as a strength. He didn't romanticize her youth. He admired her experience. He valued the beauty of her history, not just the sparkle of her fame, and that touched Cher deeply. With Josh, Cher didn't feel the need to perform. She didn't need to be dazzling, flawless, or explosive. She felt accepted, the kind of acceptance that comes from someone who understands that love evolves, softens, deepens with time. Their moments together were quieter than her past romances, but no less meaningful. A shared laugh, a late-night conversation, a comfortable silence, a gentle understanding that life doesn't stop offering connection just because the years keep passing. Josh represented something Cher hadn't realized she was still searching for, a new beginning, even at 79. He reminded her that intimacy doesn't have an expiration date, that the heart doesn't retire, that a new chapter can start even when the world thinks your story is already written. Their relationship is more recent, still unfolding, still tender, but what matters is what it symbolizes: hope. Josh Lucas became the proof that even after a lifetime of iconic romances, Cher could still discover a love